All right, Matt Petrick. That's a win right there. Matt, can you hear me? Ryan, what's going on, buddy?
Yeah, Drew.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Cool. I always have like a moment of dread that like I sent out the wrong invite to people and I just like botched the whole thing. So
No, it worked. It made me get on Facebook, so I got on Facebook and yeah.
Hooray. Welcome back to that toxic mess. Hopefully Mitch can figure it out. He was doubting his abilities earlier today.
I feel like it's pretty it's pretty easy. Like it screwed me up. I tried to use my phone and that was a little bit of a pain in the butt, but the first time, but the web interface.
Hey, Kurt's here now. What's going on, Kurt? Hey, buddy.
How you doing?
Let's see here.
Is that fire, Drew?
Yeah, let's keep the mosquitoes away.
Oh,
So,
it's just out of frame, just slightly.
yeah, it's just far enough to, deceive people a little bit, but might move it actually a little closer to the wood. My tiki bar is outdoors, so I actually have to deal with the elements. Hey, bud.
Hey, man, what are you doing?
We're about to do a virtual happy hour. Where are you?
I have my home. I have to go out bar. We're doing happy hour. Tonight she's picking wines, but
Yeah, Mitch figured it out. All right. He's still awake.
How we doing?
Doing good, man.
There he is.
Mr. Petrick. Yeah.
Wait, we need to get a little bit of a tropical vibe going.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
Awesome. So we are blowing up already. All kinds of interested people and like want to know about this Black Tot stuff they've been reading about online.
Hey, Dane.
Hey, baby. How are you?
How are you?
Good, dude. How you doing?
I'm in LA.
Yes, you haven't got a local. Hey, Wendy.
Mitch converted me when I visited London. So,
Got on the run. We had a very expensive night in Savoy.
well, now I'm a rum drinker, which I was mezcal and he totally converted me.
You should be both. That's what I do. I do both.
I have favorites at a time. So I had been in a long mezcal phase. And now, unfortunately, I have been given a flavor of like very high-end rum. And so I'm sort of stuck for a while.
Yeah, understandable. Totally understandable. So usually we wait a couple more minutes just to let kind of people remember and stuff like that. But can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear Mitch so far?
Yeah, I can hear you guys both.
Good.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Drew,
Good.
your background's awesome.
Thank you. I was getting jealous of other people's backgrounds during our during the happy hours. And so when I tried to mix it up to my inside bar, we had a poor connection last night. So tonight I'm like, all right, let's try outside at the tiki bar and see if this works. And so far, nothing's dropped yet. So I'm pretty excited about the current situation. Hopefully that remains to be the case.
Oh, hey, Adrian.
Hey, Matt.
How you doing?
Hey, Matt.
Hey there.
How you guys doing?
I'm already at my tie-in, so.
Yeah, I've made way more tiki drinks at home in the last couple of weeks than ever in my life. So that's a thing.
Hey, did I see Matt?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, bud.
Hey, Ron.
Who else is in here? Who's all here? Oh, hey, everybody.
Yeah, a pretty good showing so far. Said,
Those children?
Drew, you know you can open a chat screen, right?
yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I see that you're making Jello cocktails instead of shots.
Making sure.
Okay.
Hey guys.
Okay, so obviously we're gonna have a bunch of people on the call and stuff like listening in. So if you guys could, if you have no questions or anything, just at this moment, just mute yourself for a bit, just in case. If you have any questions throughout and you're a little too nervous to ask yourself, there is the chat box, so you can go ahead and send a message to there, and I can ask on your behalf. Or it's I don't want anyone to feel like they're being talked at. So if feel free to chime in or make a scene. Right now I have quite a few people's faces on my screen, so I'll try to catch everybody if they raise their hand or not. But yeah, so you guys, welcome to Drew's Virtual Happy Hour. This is something that I started last week as a way to kind of feel a little bit more normal. I just a background because we have a lot of new faces in here. I work for a company called JVS Imports out in California, and we deal in a lot of like really special spirits, a lot of esoteric stuff, a lot of things that require a little bit more than of a hand sell, as opposed to just like, yeah, it's a great shot, so a little bit more effort that goes into it. And we have the privilege of representing some really, really amazing brands. And one of those brands is actually brand new to the portfolio, and we're really excited to have it, and that is Black Tot rum. And judging by the attendance so far, I think some people have heard of it before, so that's really cool that we have this many people out here. And in a brand new role, one of the most traveled bartenders I've seen just via a Google search. Mitch Wilson is their, I guess, worldwide brand ambassador. Is that the appropriate title?
Yeah, by default, because there's no one, we haven't employed anyone else yet. So I'm just covering it all until we get more people. So.
Just a super, super small task. Just cover the entire globe until we figure out what else we want to do. That's seems like the right approach. So again, guys, like this was just kind of set up to make people feel a little bit more normal about the current situation that we're in. And then while we're doing it, because I know most of us really enjoy talking spirits, we figured, hey, why don't we learn something? So we've had some really fun guests over the past week, and Mitch's tonight. We're going to continue to do this for the rest of the month. So if you guys are interested, I'll continue to post it on all the social media sites and stuff like that. So please keep tuning in. We have all kinds of cool stuff coming up. And so with that said, Mitch, why don't we just kind of start with your origins in this business, and what what were kind of the steps that led you to this point?
Well, I suppose I want to see the guy who's making these. He looks like he's batching daiquiris for everyone.
Yeah, so that's my good friend Buddy. He is actually the owner of the Jungle Bird, which is a tiki bar in Sacramento.
Awesome.
They're doing to-go cocktails right now, so he's currently their only employee, it seems like. So he's making their drinks right now. So, but he wanted to tune in because he was very, very excited about this.
Good man, what a hero. Yeah, so I guess backstory wise, so I started in the bar industry a few years back. I was working in the music industry at the time. I was touring with a friend, and we needed money. A friend of mine had said if ever I needed to or wanted to learn how to bartend, come and find him. And when that time came, he was working at a rum bar in London called Trailer Happiness. So I went to Trailer, met the guys there, and they didn't have any shifts whatsoever. But I was living around the corner, so I'd go in there and have a daiquiri, have a beer, have a shot. And I worked out over a period of time that the thing the bartenders hated doing most was cleaning down the bar at the end of the night. So I would go in every 2 or 3 nights, go in about an hour before close and help them just clean up the tables, wash down stuff, until their bar back didn't show up one day. And he was like, okay, you can come in tomorrow and help me with the stock take, and you'll get your first shift. So that's kind of how I snuck into the bar industry. And Trailer kind of opened my eyes to rum. I'd never really seen anything like it before. And certainly where I grew up, outside of London, this place called Essex, we didn't have any fancy cocktail bars or anything. I think the only rum I'd probably ever had was like a Sailor Jerry and Coke. Smirnoff Ice was like the fanciest cocktail I think I'd had so far. And so coming to Trailer was like a real eye-opener into the world of rum, because if anyone's ever been there, you've got like 300 rums on the back bar there, bottles that I've never seen before or since. And you just, I don't know, you go into most bars, you might have 5 shitty rums in the corner. You go to Trailer and you've just got so much to play with and so much to see. So that was my start in rum. That got me hooked, got me interested. And then I sort of bartended in a few different places. I worked in LA for about 6 months. Came back to London, worked in another bar there. Then ended
I don't want to gloss over the LA thing, because it was only a few months, but you were at Cole's Red Card Bar. And
that's right. Yeah.
Not only do they have like a really amazing bar, but that's also allegedly the home of the French dip, right?
Yes, home of the French dip.
This is kind of a constant theme through your career, which, if you think about it, it's kind of short considering where you're at now, in terms of what you've been able to do in a short amount of time. So you start at arguably one of the best rum bars in the world, and that's actually a really cool story. And then you end up at another amazing bar, like one that's considered one of the best in America, that also happens to do really rad French dips. I mean, how does that happen? How do you go from a guy who just occasionally cleans a bar to moving to America and kind of being like, oh yeah, by the way, I work at one of the top 25 bars in America, now?
I guess I've always been good at finding myself in weird positions.
The history helps.
When I got to LA, at the time I had no intention of carrying on in the bar industry. I was doing music at that time, still touring, and we needed money again. And my friend had said, "Oh, go to this bar, Harvard and Stone. Go to Harvard and Stone. There's a guest shift there with this bartender called Simon Ford. He is gonna make some drinks tonight, and all the bartenders will be there." And I was like, oh, "Okay, cool." And they emailed ahead to Giovanni Martinez, who was running Sadie's at the time, and I turned up at Harvard and Stone, had no idea who anyone was. Giovanni met me and was like, "Oh, everyone, this is, Simon Ford's making drinks on the bar," which I didn't know at the time, but was a pretty fucking big deal. And Giovanni's like, "Oh, hey, everyone, this is Mitch. He worked at Trailer Happiness. Who wants to hire him?" And I'm like, "No, like, I polish glasses. I have no idea what I'm doing." And everyone's like, "Oh, you worked at Trailer Happiness, cool." So I was very lucky. The lady running Coles at the time was a lady called Brent Falco. I'm sure a lot of you know over in the States. And Brent was like, "I can give you some day shifts, and you might be bar backing a bit. We can get you on the bar a bit. Like, you'll be fine." I was like, "Okay, cool." And I was definitely at that time trying to pretend like I knew more than I did, and like trying to get away with it. So, like I remember emailing Brent and saying, or I messaged Brent back at home, and I was like, "I've got these shifts at this bar. What do I do? What do I say?" They think I'm some hotshot bartender from Trailer, and they're like, "Oh, just message the bar owner and ask for the specs." And I'm like, "What are the specs?" And they're like, "It's like what goes in the cocktails." I'm like, "Okay, cool." So I messaged Brent and I'm like, "Hey, can I get the specs?" And she was like, "Oh, you'll be fine. They're all classic cocktails." And I was like, "What are the classic cocktails?" So I'm like looking up their menu online, like, Manhattan, what's a Manhattan? What's vermouth? And I'm like going in all these things. And so the way I did it for the first couple of weeks I was there, because I knew America worked in ounces and we worked in mils. So every single drink that came up, I just asked the bartender next to me, I was like, "Can you just show me how you make that one? Because I just want to see like how you do it here and how you do it in ounces." He's like, "Oh yeah, sure, man." Like shows me the thing. And I was like, okay, I could just remember what the bottles looked like and how much he roughly put in on each one, and sort of like one by one learn all the specs for all these drinks. And it didn't take too long. Brent just kind of looked at me one day and she was like, pulled me aside. It's like, "You have no idea what you're doing, do you?" I was like, "Absolutely no." She's like, "It's okay, we'll teach you." So I learned how to make a really good old fashioned there, because you made about 100 old fashions a day at Coles, and it was all like with the brown sugar cube and everything done like proper old school. And then by the time I got back to London, everyone in London thought it was so hilarious that I'd got this bar gig in LA that they were like, "Okay, we'll show you how to do it now properly." And so I got a bit more training in London, worked at this bar called Made in the Shade. And then by the time I got to Sydney, my resume looked amazing, because I'd worked in like London, LA, back in London, and then I'd come to Sydney. And so I rocked up at this bar in Sydney, and they were like, "Oh, yeah, like, do you want to run this bar?" I'm like, "Sure." So a lot of my job was, I think most bartenders, it's a common theme you see on groups and stuff. It's like, how do I get started? How do I get my first gig? Because no one wants to hire someone without experience. And I think it's a bit of luck, and it's a bit of just chancing it and reading lots and trying to make up in your spare time what what you don't know. You just put in the extra effort behind the scenes, and hopefully someone gives you enough of a chance and doesn't fire you before you can figure out how to make the drinks.
Well, I think that's another thing that maybe because it's such like a modest rise that you kind of glossed over another thing, and then you just end up in Sydney, Australia, from London.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you end up at the Henrietta Supper Club, but like, what brought you out to Sydney? Was it still music, or did you finally agree to be a bartender by this point?
No, so I still wasn't fully in. I'd sort of finished up touring with my friend, the musician, is a fantastic musician, a guy called Saint Leonard. If you guys like your music, check him out. He's awesome. So we sort of finished up, and I had written a children's book that I wanted to get illustrated, and I'd met this girl who was this amazing artist, and our bar had just closed, and it was like this 400-year-old pub that they were going to sell and turn into a supermarket. It was like a real shame. So I had no reason to be in London, and I'd met this beautiful girl, and she was like, "Do you want to come to Australia?" And I was like, "Sure." So flew to Australia on a whim, and ended up again. I was like, maybe this is my time to actually get stuck into something and start working. And so started working at this bar in Sydney. And it sort of all went from there, really. It's my first gigs when I got over there, because I didn't know anyone in the bar industry at that time. I went and did a couple of pop-up gigs there's a company called Sweet and Chili that I think is in the States now as well, that do awesome events. They had some events, so I went and did like the odd bartending gig for them. And then there was this one which was done with Time Out, and there was loads of bartenders there. And I was just like, I had a notepad at the side of the bar, and we were making these shit vodka cocktails. And I was just like, which bar do you work at? Okay, write them down, like, and just made a list of who to go and visit until I found someone. And I was staying with friends about an hour outside of Sydney at the time, and I missed my last bus home. So I was stuck at this bar called Hello Sailor in Sydney, which was like the late night bar at the time. And there was this guy there called Michael Drescher, who it was his birthday, and he definitely had a few drinks. And he was like, I've heard about you. You're the guy who was at Trailer and in LA. And like, we've got this position coming up at Henrietta Supper Club. And Henrietta's was like this little unicorn in Sydney, because Sydney bars had to close by a certain time. We had this thing called a lockout, where after midnight you couldn't have shots, and after 1:30 you got locked out the door. And they tried to kill off the Sydney nightlife for a while, and got to Henrietta's, and basically because Henrietta's it opened at 10 p.m. and closed at 5 a.m. So it's much like tonight's shift here. And pretty much if you could last more than 3 months there, you ended up running the bar, because no one could do those hours or hack that for longer than 3 months or so. And that's exactly what I did. I stayed there for about 3 months. Everyone else kind of cycled through, and it was like, cool, you're running the bar now. I was like, okay. And a good friend of mine, he's this huge New Zealander guy who's like almost 7 foot tall and just like an absolute unit of a man. He told me months later that when I first got to the bar, because I was doing the same thing, I was like, how do you make that drink here? And he was like, it's a test. And so he was like proper on edge, thinking that, man, this hotshot bartender from London's come over, and now he's testing me on my specs for a Negroni. And I'm like, okay, cool, that's how you make a Negroni, right? so yeah. But Henrietta's was great, because I guess that's where I ended up actually putting in the hours, and I could just make drinks like every night, 7 hours a night. And I just spent the whole time on the bar just trying to learn, just trying to practice, and because it was a hospo bar, bartenders would just come in and be ordering daiquiris, Manhattans, classics, Negronis all night long, and you just got to put in the practice. So
yeah. So before we move on into kind of like more of the jobs that make sense and why you're in the role now, was there a point when you were in Australia where you were actually part of like a TEDx talk or an event?
I helped them out. Yeah, I helped. I just sort of volunteered and helped put on some shows. So I was doing some. I think I did a couple of writing things for them, because I was still trying to do as many writing gigs as I could on the side. And yeah, they asked me to interview a few people that were going to go up as speakers and put together a couple of stories and stuff. So
Okay.
about that, but yeah.
So, well, the reason I ask is because through the magic of Google and going past the first 2 pages, you can find some pretty interesting things on the internet.
Yeah,
And
right.
one
Yeah.
is actually a bio of you, and I would like to read you this bio, and I want you to tell me what's true and what's not. Now, some of this stuff we already know is true because you've already admitted to it, but I'm
Right.
gonna read the whole thing. It's somewhat long, so bear with me. But here it goes. So it has you listed as a writer, and says Mitch grew up with the prescribed intentions of studying law at Cambridge and a career in academia. However, life had other plans which led him to dropping out of school and hitting the road. Since then, Mitch has traveled the world looking for stories. His journey so far has led him to become a karate instructor, an Apple genius, a tour manager, a Hunter S. Thompson poet impersonator. I really hope that's true. A writer for Disney, and a bartender. He is currently transcribing a children's book for cats and searching the world for an empath illustrator who can draw the things in his head.
Yeah. Yeah, that's surprisingly, that's all true. Yes.
So that's our new Black Tot ambassador right there. Also a Hunter S. Thompson poet impersonator.
Yeah, so that so this comes back to the time in LA. So God, that's a whole other story which I'll try and cut down for you. But basically, my friend, my very dear friend, and I went over to LA to record his album, and again, neither of us really had any money. We were just like, let's just get there and we'll just work it out, because we'd been touring around Europe a little bit, and the way we toured around Europe was essentially we did couch surfing, because as a support musician you get no money whatsoever. I think we made like £100 or $100 a night if you were lucky, you know. And we got to LA and I was like, how long do we need? It's like, about 6 weeks. And after 3 months, we still hadn't stepped foot inside the record studio, and it was taking quite a while to get things going and get the musicians together and get everything going. So that was when I started working at Coles and did the shifts there. But I told them that, well, after 3 months, my visa's up, so I have to leave the country. So, you know, after that, don't give me any more shifts. And then 3 months came up and we had to basically fly out of the country and fly back in to renew our 3-month visa so we could carry on. And when I came back, they had a couple of shifts, but not really that much. And I'd flown to Argentina and I had a lot of money stolen by a person that I was staying with in Argentina. So I came back to LA and basically had no money, no money for the studio, no money to get around. We were kind of very, very stuck. Wendy, actually, who's one of the people on this chat, very kindly put us up for the first 3 months. That's how we survived the first 3 months.
How much? Oh yeah.
By the second 3 months, I think Wendy had enough of us, so we were trying to find a way to carry on. And
I just come back from Bali, so and I had a relatively new boyfriend, so
yeah, that was fair. So we stayed with another friend in LA, and then we had borrowed a typewriter off a poet who basically did like these on-demand poetry sessions. So you could go up to her, tell her a theme, she'd write you a poem, and you tip her whatever you thought that poem was worth. And we borrowed a typewriter off her for my friend to write up his songs for the music. And I just remember looking around the place, and I had no bar shifts left, and I think I had like $2. And I was like, I wonder if I could just do that on Venice Beach. So on Venice Beach in LA, as I'm sure some of you know, is like, you've got all these little spots where all these like hawkers can go and sell their wares and sell their stuff. So I from this place, I took the typewriter and like a rug and a hat and some glasses and like a tiki shirt. And it was my first ever tiki shirt, actually. went down to this spot on Venice Beach, and basically if you got there early enough, you got the spot. You didn't have to pay for anything. And I didn't have a work visa to be there, so it was definitely illegal. And I just sort of set up this like Hunter S. Thompson living room on Venice Beach and put a sign just saying poet for hire. People would come up and I'd write them a poem and then read it in the thickest English accent I could muster, because I realized that they tipped much more if I sounded really English. And I did that for about, for about 3 months. So I've weirdly got this collection of very, very bad poetry, which one day I might just release all the pictures of. So
now, is this the kind of stuff that goes on the resume, or do you just hope that that doesn't come up?
It's, I don't know, like sometimes it's a really funny story. It's really hard sometimes to explain like the timeline of how it all fits together, because it doesn't really make sense. Like I look back on it and I'm like, I don't understand what happened there. But yeah, you know, it makes it fun.
Well, I think we need to bring it back to kind of like, you know, normal life and stuff like that. So
I didn't expect the background research you were going to do.
Listen, buddy, I got a lot of free time on my hands right now. Okay, so I'm doing the research. So this kind of brings us to like stuff that's actually relevant, but you know, to our today's conversation. It's not that anything else wasn't. It was really great. I'm glad that you were able to share with us. But then you become the Mason Ferrand ambassador for Australia and New Zealand. So, you know, most of us know Mason Ferrand, obviously known for the cognacs, but also within the rum world, they are infamous for the Plantation series, which is, you know, one of my favorite things in the entire world. How did that opportunity come up? And then when you were in that role, like, you know, what were some of the things that you were doing? How were you preaching the good word of rum to Australia and New Zealand?
Now you know the other stories. This kind of fits in quite well with how I got all my other jobs. So I was at Henrietta's. I was running the bar there, and one day a sales rep came in and said, "Oh, I've got all these plantation bottles. It's this new thing in Australia. Would you like any?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah!" Like, plantation is awesome. And I knew it from London. I remember having shots of it at Trailer, and I remember it being this huge thing. And Paul McFadden over there, like, was the owner of Trailer and also is the plantation ambassador. So I was like, yeah, we'll take, how many different bottles have you got? And I think there was like 12 different SKUs at the time of plantation. And I was just like, okay, well, we'll just take all of them. And we just had like a little plantation section on this rum shelf at the bar. And so bartenders started coming in. We just started, you know, introducing everyone to it, and everyone was like, what are these things? And I always remember, like, the first month I was like, what's this string stuff around the plantation bottles? Like, I'm going to cut that off. You can't see what's behind it. And then and then one of them caught fire as well, because we had like candles behind them. And I realized if you didn't take the string off, everyone would be like, oh, what's the one with the string on? And they really like stood out on the bar. And I was like, that's probably why they have the string on. So we were just big fans of plantation, basically, and knowing it from Trailer, we just supported it at the bar. And it wasn't very big in Australia at the time. I think like a couple of rum bars had some old vintage bottles of it, but no one really had heard of the brand before. No one really seen it. And they ran a plantation competition to make your own zombie. And me and two of the other guys from the bar did this. We did this basically zombie competition, and we carried one of the guys in a chest, and we brought him back to life and set a pineapple on fire and did this whole thing. And it was ridiculous. I think the drink probably wasn't very good, but we did such a good show. They were like, you guys win. And that didn't actually lead to anything, except it put me back in touch with Paul McFadden at Trailer Happiness. And he was like, oh, well done, this thing. He's like, by the way, they're looking for a sales guy in Sydney. You should speak to them. You should apply. And so I contacted the distributor there. And I said, what are you looking for? He's like, it'll just be like a sales role, 2 days a week. We just want someone who's really good at spreadsheets and admin. And I'm thinking, that's not me at all. And he's like, yeah, we just need someone who's really good at all the paperwork and admin side. And I was like, I don't think that's what you need at all. I think what you need is someone to go around, buy everyone a shot and a daiquiri, and just get people to try it. Because I'm sure once they try it, they'll love it and they'll fall in love with it. And he's like, no, we're not going to do a brand ambassador thing. And I was like, how much would you pay a sales guy for doing 2 days a week? Because I can't give up my job to do just that. Like, what would that be a month? And I think at the time it was like $1,000 a month or something in Australia. And because of my visa, you're only allowed to have one job at a time anyway. So I said, well, why don't you put that $1,000, put it on a card? I will go and spend that card at bars and buy people shots of plantation. And if it works, you can hire me afterwards. He's like, oh, I'm not sure. So the next day he calls me back. It's like, okay, we'll give it a go. We'll send you a card. I was like, sweet. So at that time, I'm just thinking, well, at the very worst, I get to have a daiquiri before work and go and do it. And so I just went around to all the bars that I knew and all the ones that were closest to me. And I basically said, I was like, have you got plantation? They were like, no. I was like, if you buy a bottle of plantation, I will come in and drink it. And they were like, okay. So everyone started buying in these bottles of plantation. I think we doubled Sydney in its first month, which I think was just me drinking it. So there was no actual, wasn't like some great marketing plan. It was just
still counts.
Just daiquiris. So we got around and suddenly this little buzz started with plantation because everyone was like, where's this come from? What's this about? And because I was running Henrietta's where all the bartenders would come, we just made it our house shot. So everyone who came in got a shot of original dark. And, I'd be working at the bar telling them about plantation. And after about 3 months, they were like, okay, we can actually take you on full time now and we'll do this whole thing. So it was like a slow build. I think it was like in the end, it was about 9 months that I was just doing this card and going around because it takes a long time to get visas sorted and stuff in Australia anyway. But yeah, over that 9 months, we sort of built up enough traction that Sydney was suddenly this little hub of plantation going on, and then gradually spread that around Australia and New Zealand and then Asia later on as well. So.
Yeah, and then you end up landing this role with Black Tot, which is one of the most infamous rum brands that's available. And then so how did that happen? How did that conversation start? Was who reached out to you? Who were the people that were instrumental in you kind of becoming this ambassador?
So basically it all came about mainly because the person that they actually wanted wasn't available. So, I got an email from, so Jim Wrigley was the person, Jim Wrigley, who now works in the Cayman Islands, but he was the guy that actually first gave me my shifts at Trailer Happiness back in the day. So sort of all throughout my bar career, he'd been the main go-to person, the person who'd sort of helped me along a lot of the steps of the way. And he sent me this email completely out of the blue, just saying, I've just been approached to be to work with Black Tot, but I've just moved to the Cayman Islands like 2 months ago. So the job's free, and I'm putting you forward as like if they want someone who's like me, I'm going to give them the person who I've trained up. So he introduced me to Sukhinder Singh, who owns the Whiskey Exchange, and it's obviously a very big name in the UK. And I had this email. At this time, I've got to confess, because I'd been in Australia for 5 years, and obviously in London, I hadn't really been that high up in the bar world at all. So I had no idea who Sukhinder was at the time. So I emailed back very, very casually, oh yeah, let me know if you need a hand with anything. And didn't hear back for about 3 months. And then just one day I just get this email back from Sukhinder saying, can we have a chat? And we had a phone call. We just talked about rum for, I think, like an hour or two on the phone, and didn't really discuss the job at all. And then I just got another email saying, can you fly to London next week and come and meet us and be here. So yeah, flew over, we had a chat, and that night I was at Trailer Happiness actually that night having some daiquiris. I was like, oh, I don't know. I didn't even know what the role was at the time, to be honest. I just, I knew they had something going. And I was at Trailer having a daiquiri with Tom there. And I just got this email being like, oh, global brand ambassador. Do you want to do it? And I was like, okay. so yeah.
That's so amazing for it to come like full circle so perfectly for you. I mean, you know, Trailer's obviously a very well-known bar, especially within this rum world and stuff like that. Was there anybody in that bar that was like, wait a minute, did the guy who cleaned dishes every 3 days just become the global brand ambassador for Black Tot? Like, how? What the hell? What have I been doing wrong?
I'm pretty sure anyone who was with me from the start and knew how just average I was when I was first starting off, I think they must all just laugh at it. But I don't know. I hope hopefully I've put in enough time in between. I should go have some rum. I'm getting thirsty. Hopefully I've definitely been lucky, and I've definitely had a lot of opportunities which kind of I was just in the right place at the right time, or just tried to put myself in the way of those kind of opportunities. But I guess the one thing which I've always tried to do is if I ever had the chance to do a role or to be in that kind of place, was just to, I would always treat it as like, I'll just read more than anyone else on this subject, or I'll just try and study the shit out of this, so that at least, I mean, there's always going to be someone smarter than you in the room. There's probably about half a dozen here. I've got with Adrian and Dane and fucking Matt Petrek in here. Like, there's plenty of people that could put me in my place with it. But I always aimed to be like, okay, what do you know? What did you read? What can I get up there? Like, how can I get there as quickly as I can? So. And it has, I've been very lucky learning off some smarter people, like in Australia. There's a guy called Tattooed Carlos, who I picked his brain all the time because he's just like a walking encyclopedia.
Definitely sounds like a good resource. Tattooed Carlos is like classic mentor name. So
yeah, he was he's wicked. And then like Matt's cocktail wonk blog, I would just like study and go over and be like constantly like, what is the difference between agricole and cachaça? Who the fuck knows? Like, apparently Matt Petrek knows. Okay. So I just like try and find these sources of people that do it. And that's why I think it's one of the things, this is probably a bit of a side note, but I think so often amongst the top like tier of rum nerds and any kind of spirits nerds, I've seen it in all types of things. There's sometimes a real like dismissiveness of like, oh, you should have read that, or you should know better, or you should have already researched this. It's like, well, maybe not. Do you know what I mean? Like, so, if maybe, yeah, okay, you've been doing it for 20 years and there's just so much ground to cover there to get where you are. But I think, you never know who that next person is going to be that might be a global ambassador, or might be the head of some great rum bar, like they might just be a bar back now, or they might have no fucking clue at all. But if you kind of shut them out, then they'll never have that opportunity. And I was always very, very lucky that the Trailer fam was always so like, they'd always help you out, they'd always put you forward, they'd always support you in any way they can. And same with Plantation, same with a lot of people in the rum world. So I think that's really important.
Well, I think a lot of us can agree to that. I mean, I know I'm a pretty avid reader of Matt's stuff as well, and in his book and all that fun stuff. And there are a lot of really great people out there. And now you're going to be one of those people, because now you're the walking representation for Black Tot rum, which, most of us will think about the consignment, but you guys have a brand new expression here. And kind of the reason that we're here tonight, and I know it's taken us a little bit, but you have a weird life and we had to talk about it. So with all that, all that behind us now, let's get into this rum. For those of you who have it, pour yourself a little bit right now so you can enjoy right along with us. But talk about Black Tot just kind of in general, and then what are the, why should people be excited about this right now?
Where to start? Yeah, okay, start with some rum, I guess. Well, first of all, cheers if anyone has any rum or whiskey or whatever you're drinking. Cheers. So I guess for me, what was so exciting about coming into this brand and what made me really jump at it was just the history involved with it all. So I guess as you say, so it all started off with this guy. This was the last consignment, and this was how Black Tot first came into the world about 10 years ago. And then this is our new guy, the Finest Caribbean, which you've got there. I think one of the things we were talking about earlier was there's a bit of confusion of was this ripping off the guys who made this? It's like, no, we're the same people. It's all the same family and all coming from the same spot. But I think it helps to kind of talk about the two next to each other to explain it. So when the original Black Tot last consignment came from these Navy rum flagons that Sukhinder had found and come across, he brought all these flagons together, and the way that came about was pretty interesting, actually. I don't know if anyone's seen Navy rum flagons, but maybe I can share the pictures here. That might allow me to... How does that work? I should have really tested this before. But here we go. Let's do that. Okay. I don't know if it'll let me share the screens, but there's these pictures. Maybe I can put it in the chat for you guys. Basically, these Navy rum flagons were discovered. So the way they were discovered, the way they came about was...
Mitch, if you want, I can, if there's a green button at the bottom that says share screen, if you click on that, that'll allow you to take an option of any window you have open. By the way, you guys, I'm an anthro professor. Share the screen. So, and while you're doing,
is it letting me do it now?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay. All right.
Look at that.
In the meantime, can anyone tell me how shit this is? Because my neighbor gave it to me, but this is the only rum I have in the house. So in chat, you can tell me how bad it is. I'm going to find out.
Is this going to be a Ministry of Rum expose? I can't actually see your screen anymore now, so I'm just going to... Can you guys see this if I put this up?
Yeah, we're basically just creeping on your laptop right now is what it looks like.
Yeah, I can see a photo.
Okay, so these are the Navy rum flagons essentially, and these are some of the ones that we found. So what happened about 12 years ago, there's an arm of Whiskey Exchange in the UK called Whiskey Auction, and this old sailor guy came up to Sukhinder with two of these Navy rum flagons and said, do you want to buy these? And he'd never seen them before, and he said, yeah, sure. And then that sailor told another friend who came back with 5 Navy rum flagons and said, do you want to buy these? And Sukhinder was like, yeah, sure. And then they told another friend who came back with 10 flagons. And at that point, Sukhinder went, okay, where are these coming from? There must be a source where you guys are getting all these supposed Navy rum flagons from. So he looked into it. It took him about 2 years to track them down, and we found basically a load of boxes that looked like this. So these are what the Navy rum flagons got stored in, and they came in these boxes. Each flagon is about 4.5 liters in size. They're all covered in this wicker, and I think you can see, yeah, all the boxes are packed with sawdust, which makes it very annoying to try and check, because when you pull one out, you can't then put it back in.
Would you say it's just as bad as packing peanuts? or worse?
It's just so messy. But I guess it's kind of
I'll add
sustainable.
in 4.5 liters is actually 1 imperial gallon.
1 imperial gallon. There we go. Thank you, Matt Petrak.
Look at that. The assist from Matt. Thank you, sir.
On Navy Rum. Matt's basically sitting there with a checklist and marking off everything I say wrong tonight. So I'll be looking for a score at the end. But yeah, we've got these boxes, and basically the only reason these were put in the boxes was to kind of just make them easier to transport, because on the ships you could put casks and obviously bigger quantities on, but each one of these boxes would weigh about 26 kilos. I don't know what that is in American weight, but it was easy enough to move around and carry 2 flagons at a time. And this is a picture of what the flagons look like underneath their little wicker casings. So they're like these stone jars, basically. And I don't know if it's worth touching on, just because, you know, of the Navy rum story. I think there's a few misconceptions, but basically, the Navy was issuing these daily tots of rum to people for 239 years. So it started in 1731. I'm trying to get you guys back. I'm missing looking at you. There we go. So basically the Navy rum ration started in 1731. They were giving everyone these tots of rum twice a day. So it started off at, I think, a half pint of overproof rum, which was mental, because obviously everyone was smashed all of the time and everyone was getting drunk, throwing each other overboard. So then they halved it and then halved it again. And then they started watering it down to make the Navy grog. And this carried on for 239 years. And basically you have, as technology improves and as you know, the ships get more advanced, and in 1958 they invented nuclear submarines, and people started to ask, you know, like, should we be getting the crew drunk when there's like a big red button and there's nuclear missiles, and like maybe we shouldn't give them rum every day? And everyone was like, no, we absolutely should. Like, this is outrageous. Of course we need to give them rum. Like, they'll all leave. Like, this is tradition. This is part of what we do. So they argued it for years and years and years, until a new admiral started, and they said, no, actually this is crazy. Let's stop giving all the British Navy a tot of rum. And so they passed it quite quickly. So on the 28th of July, they passed the vote, and 3 days later it was Black Tot Day, which basically just refers to the funeral that they had for the rum. It was the last day of this rum ration. And the sailors were really pissed off about it. Like, I think we look back on it now and we think, you know, well, of course that's crazy. Why would we give military people drinks every day? That seems nuts. But they really were like, they couldn't believe it that they'd lost this rum. And I had an email about 6 weeks ago from this gentleman, and it was a bottle shop had contacted us and said, oh, we're looking for some Navy rum because this guy's emailed us. And I looked down the thread, and it was this old sailor guy who'd just been like, I'm looking for some Navy rum because I used to issue the tot from 1961 until that terrible day in 1970 where the government did this despicable act and got rid of the rum ration. And he was so pissed off about it. And I was like, can I please have this guy's email? So I've been emailing back and forth with with this guy, this purser who used to give out the rum every day. And he's been telling me all the stories of how they used to steal the rum and sneak some extra out, and how they get more than their normal rations and all this kind of stuff. But,
Mitch.
What's that?
I was just going to add that the number of sailors by that point had dropped substantially. Basically, if you did not take the ration, you got payment instead. And from about 1900s on, fewer and fewer people were actually taking the rum ration and taking the money instead. So,
well, it was an interesting thing, because I think we were discussing this at some point, but certainly this guy, John, who's been giving out the tots, he said you could take the money, but certainly in his circle of friends, it seems at least, they all took the rum because for them the rum was worth so much more. You could swap it for favors. You could give someone some extra rum, you could give the chef some extra rum and get some extra food. Like it was a real bartering system, like kind of how they talk about cigarettes in prison and stuff. It's like you swap your rum out for whatever you could on the ship. So yeah, but you're right for sure. Like the temperance movement was definitely growing, and there were some there was some navies that kind of called it early, and I'm pretty sure, Matt, you probably know better than I do, but like the American forces pretty much cut it very early on. But then there was other navies.
Lincoln, 1862.
1862. So they had a good 108 years on the UK. We carried on drinking because Britannia was the waves. And then I think the New Zealand Navy didn't stop until, I think it was 1994. It kept going on. So they were much later on giving up their tots. But it was a real institution. And as Matt's kind of put up on some of his posts, deep diving into the Navy rum, which are well worth a read if you haven't already. They were blending, 4 million gallons of rum at any one time. So when they cooled off the rum ration, when they actually finally killed it off, they would have still had a lot of rum left. And a lot of this got sealed. So I'm just going to show you, I think it's this one. Yeah, so these are, can everyone still see the screen? Are you still getting the pictures, Drew?
Yeah. I can see it, and the little wax stamp on it.
Yeah, so these wax stamps are basically how they date each Navy rum flagon. So the first date here would be the month, and then this would be the year. So this was bottled in December 1970, which would have been about 5 months after Black Tot Day. So not all of these wax seals are intact. Some of them break. We had a few fallen soldiers when I went up to sea. So this was a cask that had been stored upside down, and all the rum had eventually just pushed its way out of the flagon. This was another one where it was kind of leaking and going weird on top. It just hadn't been sealed properly. So that tasted pretty gross. And yes, of course, I tried it. So yeah, so basically they stored all this rum away in these flagons, and it kind of disappeared for a while. So as far as we understand it, it was stored in warehouses in London for the time being. And then eventually when they wanted to sell off these warehouse spaces, they sold off, if not all of it, certainly quite a big portion of these Navy rum flagons. And it was picked up by some really random companies. Like one of them was a wine company that picked some up. There was another company in the States that had picked some up. And which is why it took Sukhinder so long to actually track all these flagons down, because they were dotted around in different parts of the world. So he eventually brought all of these flagons together, got them all in the same place. And that's when we first did the last consignment originally. So the last consignment, this guy, is the actual bottling of these flagons. So we put the flagons in together, bottled it as it was. The Navy had issued all the rum at 54.5% ABV, which was their standard issuing strength. We had lost 0.2% by the time it came around to bottling. So all the last consignment is at 54.3, and that's just how it came. That's just what it was by the time we'd emptied out the flagons. Just one last little thing I'll show you here before I'll take off the screen share. But this was a cool little thing I just found in one of the boxes. I'm pretty sure that's blood on there, but you can see this would have just been like a card basically for marking off orders for the ship and what they had. And then down here on this bottom right, you've got like how much each box should feed. So you've got a box of biscuits feeds 100 men, and one jar of rum feeds 80 men. And I just thought it was just a cool little relic that we found and came across a long time. So So yeah, so there's cool stuff, and we're still trying to figure out some of it. You know, we've got some boxes of rum which say that they're packed in 1955, was sent over to Antwerp, and then sent back 12 years later. And we're sort of still trying to figure it out. Matt and I have had a couple of little conversations about this, looking into some of the background of it. But it's you know, it's fascinating. And again, I messaged the guy this purser, John, who had been issuing the tot, and I said, why do you think all this rum was left over? And he was just like, what do you mean there's rum left over? Like, who were they? Why didn't they drink it? You know, like he was kind of almost offended that he was like, oh, they must have given it, you know, they must have given it to one of the other services or something to hold on to. Like the Navy would have drunk it, you know. It's like a real point of pride for him. So yeah, so that's kind of the story of how Black Tot started 10 years ago. So that came out on the 40th anniversary of Black Tot Day. Basically last year we decided, wouldn't it be cool if there was an actual daily tot of rum that you could actually enjoy and not break your bank or sell your house to do? Because assignment costs about, well, in the UK it's about £650. So it's not the cheapest rum to buy. And obviously the whole point of the daily tot was something you could have every day. It was something for the crew. It was not, at the time, it wasn't something special. You know, obviously now it's this little relic of history that we've got bottled. But certainly at the time, it was more just, well, there should be a tasty rum that everyone enjoys and that, you know, is blended for the fleet, that everyone's going to get along. So last year, basically what they did was they sort of went back to the drawing board and said, right, rather than try to copy Last Consignment or just try and do a cheap imitation of it, because you can't really create the rum that they were creating with today's production methods. They were like, what would this blend look like if we started it again today? So if we were going to do this Black Tot daily rum ration for the Navy of today, what would that look like? You know, what would be the distilleries? What would be the flavor profiles people would like? You know, part of Matt's research has found out that, you know, the Navy, after a while, actually said that they didn't want any more Jamaican rum in the blend. Like, it was too intense, it was too funky, it was too full on. They actually stopped ordering any more Jamaican rum to be blended. Whereas today, I think, you know, the rum world's kind of heading more towards the Jamaican funk, and they like a bit of that. So we've actually put that back into the blend. So I'm going to drink some. It's 4 a.m. now. It's now been happy hour in the UK for about 9 hours. So we're going well. So yeah, so we've basically restarted the blend of this, and I think the first question people ask is like, oh, does it have any of the old Navy rum flagons in, or is it any of the Last Consignment? Like, no, absolutely not, because otherwise it would cost a ton. But I can tell you what we've put in it and what we've put into the blend to try and help explain it a little bit more. So if you haven't had it yet, hopefully you can get to try it pretty soon. So in this rum, we've got 4 different rums in the blend. Can everyone hear me okay? I've got some feedback coming. Everyone good? All right. So yeah, we've got 4 different rums in the blend. So the first one we put in is some Barbados rum. Again, I'm not 100% sure what we're allowed to say, but it comes from Foursquare. It's a 5-year-old Barbados rum, so pot and column blend. That makes up about 35% of the blend of this. Then we've got 2 Guyanese rums. So one portion is unaged. That makes up about 20% of the blend. And then the other portion is 3 to 5 years old. And that makes up about 40%. If you've been counting, that brings us up to about 95%.
Can you tell us what the stills they were from? The guy.
Here we go. No, essentially. So, and I'll tell you why we can't. To a certain extent, we don't know. So when we do this blend, as I'm sure the rum geeks here will know, one of the main places you go to if you want to do a rum blend, if you want to create something, you go through EA Shear in Amsterdam, and they have essentially blends on hand of hundreds of different styles of rum and hundreds of different distilleries and different bits and pieces. And so Shear themselves have their own marks and their own blends and own flavor profiles, which they then put into their blends. So like if you read Matt's deep dive into Guyana and DDL, you'll see, they've got 24 different marks across all their different stills. And, ideally you'd be able to go straight to DDL and say, right, I want this much of mark 23 from the Saval still or from this still. That tends not to happen through Shear. Shear have another branch called Main Rum, which deals pretty much exclusively in single casks. Now, in the single casks, it's much more specific. You can say, right, this is a 10-year-old Guyanese rum from the Port Morant double retort pot still. That's what this rum is, or this one's from the Column, or this one's from the Versailles. But with
I would say that Port Morant is sort of the signature note of the actual Navy rum for many years.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. There's, as I say, in the two Guyanese rums we have, in the 3 to 5, I would say fairly confidently there's a fair bit of Port Morant in that one. That one's pretty delicious. So, and what we're going to do as well, to try and help explain this better, because talking about it is one thing, but when I come over to the States, when we come and do masterclasses with you, what I've actually done is ordered the 4 component blends that we use to make up this rum. So when we do a tasting or we do a masterclass together, I'll actually be able to give you each of the 4 components individually, so you can try the Barbados, try the 2 Guyanas next to each other, try the Jamaica, and sort of see how all those sit on that flavor wheel of rum, like what they all do individually. And then you can try, obviously, the finest Caribbean all together, and you can see what the finished product tastes like. So hopefully that will, help explain and show what's really in the blend and make it a little clearer. But yeah, so when you're making a rum blend with Shear, it's a really interesting process, and it's something that I think a lot of rums don't really talk about, which is interesting because I think it's fascinating. And Shear's always done a really good job of staying in the background, and they kind of don't take credit for anything. But if you've ever had a rum where, you have a rum, it can't tell you what distillery it's from, and it's kind of a little bit vague, it's probably come from Shear. Like, they've done the blend, they've done something, and but it's quite a fascinating process. So, as I say, they've got hundreds of different marks which are their own Shear marks, and those themselves, they will add, they will change. So, when we say there's a 3 to 5 year in Guyanese rum in this, the reason why we're not more specific is because that blend changes from year to year. Like, they might have to put a bit more 5 year in or a bit more younger rum in to keep that flavor profile the same. So it's kind of like, it's just like, I don't know, when you're cooking or you're making a cocktail or whatever, like, I can give you the exact measurements of what everything should be, and just as I give you the exact measurements of what we put in here, but you might taste it and go, actually, it needs a touch more funk, it needs a touch more Jamaica, it's not quite the same as last year's batch. So, these blends do change and do adjust from year to year, and that just is trying to keep it consistent. But yeah, that's why sometimes you get those broader age ranges and things like that. So in a very long-winded way, Matt, no, I'm not sure exactly what's in there, but I do know they're both pot and column blends. And as I say, I'm pretty sure the 3 to 5 years is pretty heavy on the Port Morant there.
Mitch, we have a question from, it's like Adrian.
Yeah.
So go ahead and have your question here.
Oh, I was just wondering when you're coming to the States, Chicago specifically. I'm very concerned.
Hopefully as soon as possible. It's, yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's nuts at the moment everywhere around the world. I mean, we're kind of trying to figure out what's going to happen, because originally I was hoping to come over to the States like in the next few weeks or so.
Okay. But if not, I mean, assuming that Tails isn't interrupted, are you going to be at Tails?
Yes, I'll be over for Tails if
Okay.
it's still going ahead. July for us is obviously quite a big one because it's the 50th anniversary of Black Tot Day. So we're kind of hoping things are up and running again by then, because we'd like to party with everyone if we can. If not, we're just going to have to like send you all out some minis or something and do something there. But yeah, so July we're I guess I can tell you. We haven't really told anyone. I don't think anyone knows this, but this is what we're planning. I'll tell you guys, and you can tell me if you think it's a good idea. But basically, Black Tot Day is the 31st of July. I don't think anyone really cares about it, but we're going to try and obviously make people care about it, because that's pretty much my one job. So we're going to turn Black Tot Day into like Black Tot Month. And what we want to do is make all of July sort of partnering up with some of our favorite bottle stores, some of our favorite bars especially. And what we're going to hopefully do is get some Black Tot cocktails going at all these different bars. You go to the bar and support them, because you'll fucking need to give them as much money as you can right now, because they'll be just opening up again, hopefully. And you need to give them your money to keep them alive and get them back in business. So you go and have your Black Tot cocktail. It'll be delicious. You'll be like, that's really good. And then with your cocktail, you'll get like a little rum ration card to invite you back on the 31st of July to that bar. And then we're going to give these bars that take part, we're going to give them some Black Tot. And we're going to do a big toast together at the end of the night. And we're going to sort of like do kind of like the fireworks at New Year's Eve, like London, New York, Paris, like get everyone to do a toast around the world and sort of celebrate Black Tot Day together. And so we're hoping to bring everyone together with it. I say hopefully it will be in the bars themselves, but we'll see what happens over the next month or two. And if we need to, we've got these like little mini guys now as well, so we might just have to send you all one of these and you can do a top with us instead.
So Mitch, one of the things that we got a little sidetracked on, what distillery in Jamaica are they working with? Or maybe I missed that, but I think we got a little sidetracked.
No. So Jamaica, so this is a 3-year-old Jamaica. This the Jamaica component is 100% pot still, and that's coming from Long Pond.
Oh, nice.
We are playing around. Oh yeah, we are. We're playing around with some Hampton as well. We've got. I don't know if we're meant to tell you this either, but I'll tell you because why not? We're bringing out a 50th anniversary blend as well for July. If the bottling plant's opening up again, because everything's shut up. But we're going to do this 50th anniversary blend, and I'm pretty sure all the rum geeks are going to really get excited about it. So it's going to have sort of the main pillars. You know, you'll have some Trinidad, Guyana, Jamaica, Barbados, but like we're going to really geek out with some of the things we put in this blend. You know, so it's as soon as we have that actually confirmed, I'll send that to you and show you what's in it. And again, we'll give you a full breakdown of all the rums that we're putting into it. But yeah, I think it's one of the few rum blends that would, you know, we could probably put on Ministry of Rum and people would be like, okay, this is all right.
It's definitely a tough crowd to, you know. So, you know, one of the things that you were just talking about, you know, doing a celebration for Black Tot, and, you know, whether or not people do that. And, you know, one company that does do that is Pussers. And per our conversation earlier, I know you wanted to dispel a lot of myths about Navy rum, and, you know, what a great segue, you know, to start with that is, what were some of the things that you wanted to cover in terms of, you know, Navy style rums and maybe what's not what's not true out there, and then what the goal of Black Tot and having, I mean, you know, you've been extremely open and transparent tonight. Like, what are those conversations going to look like moving forward, and what do you kind of want to change in terms of how people view Navy rums?
I think it's interesting. I know, and again, I know Matt's covered a lot of this already on some of his on Cocktail Walk, but I think for me, it's more just trying to really, I don't know, like to give you an analogy, in the bartending world, we tell lots of bartending stories, and almost all of them end up being bullshit. You know, it's like, oh, this is how this cocktail came, and this was the story behind this. It's like, no, it isn't. Like, that didn't happen at all. And I think it's just important with Navy Rum to sort of look at it as a style. It's like, with how best to put it. I always think of like Demerara sugar with this, right? If everyone's heard of Demerara sugar, you go, oh, Demerara sugar, that's awesome. That's beautiful sugar, and it comes from Guyana, and it's great. And it's like, well, actually, if you look at most Demerara sugars, they just call it Demerara, but it isn't actually from Guyana, and it's kind of like just a brown sugar that they call Demerara because it's kind of that style. And I think to a certain extent, Navy Rum has suffered this a little bit over the years. So, I mean, Navy Rum has become a term, it's become a style, like, and even back in the day, still in the old posters and stuff you see for Navy Rum, like, it was a marketing term people would use, like, oh yes, you know, drink rum like they do in the Navy, like drink this style of rum. And I think people got this idea of Navy Rum being this black, maybe tasting good, maybe not, like kind of there's some real varying degrees on in the Navy Rum world, you know, and you can get some pretty cheap, nasty stuff, and you can get some really awesome stuff, you know, like talking about Pussers, they've just brought out their 50th anniversary blend, and it's delicious, you know. I think it's really, really nice. It's really very, very good. So, you know, they've set the bar quite well. And obviously people like Pussers have done so much for the Navy Rum story, and I think they're probably single-handedly responsible for making any bartender give a shit about Navy Rum at all. So I mean, like, without them, I don't think we would be doing this right now. You know, it's like, it's a very much hand-in-hand thing. But there are certain like little myths, little things which sort of creep into it. Like, and I think the biggest one is probably just about the secret recipe that they had for the Navy Rum. It's like, well, not really. You know, there was no secret recipe, and certainly I don't think anyone's ever seen it.
Okay, the blend changed substantially over time, but there was never a specific recipe they always adhered to.
Well, exactly, you know, and with all the, you know, Matt's very kindly shown me some of the old archive documents he's pulled out, and, you know, showing, you know, the Navy, the Admiralty would put out basically orders saying, you know, we want 100,000 gallons of this type of rum, and come and sell it to us if you've got it, you know. And people would bid, and they'd try and sell their rum, and then they'd either make it up from one merchant or across a couple. And it wasn't sort of like that one, you know, the Navy never had some like master blender sitting in the tasting room. Let me, oh yes, this needs this, this needs that. It was like, no, they needed a lot of rum. They needed to make this 4 million gallons of rum for everyone. And it would be 100,000 gallons of this and 200,000 gallons of that. And as much as you try to buy it from the English islands, so obviously, you know, your Barbados, Trinidad, Jamaica, Guyana would make sense because they were your own ports from your Navy. But, you know, as Matt's found, there's records from countries all over the world, like pretty much anyone who made rum at some point that went into this Navy rum blend. And I think the only thing which I could say is close to being like, oh, there was a recipe or there was a semblance of people going, we want this or we want that, was when they took out the Jamaican rum and they said, no, we're not going to add any more Jamaican, we're going to move more into like Trinidad style because, you know, not quite as full on as that very, very heavy, funky Jamaican style. So there was an element of taste in there. There was this element of like, this was the crew's morale. So if the rum didn't taste good, you were going to have a mutiny on that.
No, they were very adamant about that. Like, this was, crew is not going to be happy with this. So.
Yeah.
Another thing might be fun for you to talk about is how Navy rum was actually underproof.
What rum, sorry?
How Navy rum was underproof.
Navy rum underproof. Yeah, okay. So this is another like this is a proper geeky section we're going to get in. You're going to need your calculators now. But so English proof was set at 57.15% ABV, okay? Why? Because, well, I don't know. I hear lots of stories. I hear stories about, our gunpowder was different to their gunpowder and this and that. I'm not sure if that's true, if we can legitimize that.
I think in the 1600s, I think it was, but I think they got the hydrometers by the 1700s, like mid 1700s, they were using hydrometers.
Yeah. So the whole idea of like setting gunpowder alight on ships seems unlikely. We're still looking for actual proof of that genuinely happening. But yeah, the proof for England was set at 57.15% ABV. Now, one of the things that's like on bottles now, when you look at it, you've got, we use ABV 46.2% on this one, 54.3 on this one. They used to use some of the older bottlings, you'll see like a degrees sign. And the degrees sign was like the proof and what they were. And so sometimes you see things like saying, oh, this is issued at 95% proof. But then in American terms, 95% proof halved would then be like 47.5% ABV. But that isn't what that meant. When you see that degrees sign, that means the percentage of. So if it was 95% proof, it was actually 95% of 57.15% ABV, which seems mental to us, but you've got to remember at this time, like, we didn't even use decimals. Like, we were still, and I know some of you guys still don't. It's like, like this whole metric systems and what wasn't being used, like everything was done on these really weird numbers and ways and maths and calculations of doing things. So Navy rum was served 4.5 degrees under proof, which meant it was 95.5% of 57.15% ABV, which meant it came down to 54.5% ABV, which is very complicated and boring.
Actually, if you look at the original Pusser's rum that was issued in 1980, it was 54.5% ABV.
Absolutely, yeah. It's it's an interesting one, and I think that was one of the things that we really came up against with our new Black Tot, because we released this at 46.2, and it's like, oh, is it proper Navy rum because it's not 54.5? It's like, well, kind of not really. I mean, because we wanted to make a rum that people would be able to drink, and sometimes, especially when you're in the bars, I think quite often the rums you have to play with aren't ready to make a drink. Like, you have to use a splash of something high proof and then blend it with something lighter. And we kind of wanted something that would be a bit more cocktail ready and a bit more cocktail friendly. And I guess it's worth noting, even though they were issuing it to the ships at 54.5% ABV, they were still watering it down to make the grog, So by the time the sailors were actually drinking it, it was kind of a whole different. It was a much lighter style already.
But not all the sailors. The officers got to drink it neat.
Well, I'm hearing different things on this now. I think that was the case certainly early doors, but towards the end, it seems that the officers were no longer allowed to have their tot at all. Anyway, someone had to stay sober on the ship, and unfortunately, it was them. So.
That's where the term Navy Neaters came from. There was actually a brand called Navy Neaters rum back in the 50s through the early 80s, I believe. So.
Right. Okay. I haven't heard of that one. We'll have to have another.
We'll talk later.
Deep dive into that one. So I guess what other things to dispel? I think a good bartending one, if there's any bartenders there, like the Navy grog idea. Like we think of a Navy grog and we think, oh, we've got lime juice in there, and we've got this and that. And like Navy grog, in terms of the ships, was just rum and water. Like that was it. You know, I somewhat foolishly asked the top guy, I was like, who juiced all the limes on your ship? And he's like, limes? I was like, yeah, because, you know, the scurvy thing, and they gave you grog to get rid of scurvy. He's like, no, it was rum and water. And he's like, what we did have was a powder. We had like a ascorbic acid powder that we could put in stuff. He's like, but that tasted awful. So yeah, there was no little barback on the ships juicing limes for daiquiris. There was no like this whole idea that Admiral Vernon invented the predecessor to the daiquiri.
No, I teased that in one of my talks, but no, Vernon did say something along the lines of, they that are good husbands of their resources may use their salt money, something like that, to purchase lime and sugar to augment the diluted rum.
Yes, yeah. Well, so apparently you could still, because scurvy was a real problem, obviously, on these ships, so they did have to tackle it. But certainly by the 60s, when this guy I'm speaking to was serving, he said if you wanted limes or you wanted sugar to put in your rum or anything like that, like you had to pay for them, and no one wanted to pay for it. So they were like, nah, we'd rather take our chance with the scurvy and do what we can. But they get little rations, so they get they essentially had like a lemon powder, which they could add to water, or they could add it to their rum, I guess, if they wanted to. And that was their like scurvy preventative powder that they had to take, which would have just been like a vitamin C powder, I guess, that they would have had to see them buy. So yeah, so it was definitely an issue, but there's little things like that. So yeah, the Navy grog thing, again, just rum and water for the most part. The recipe thing, that's kind of like, no.
You might also, it might be interesting to explain why the flagons, and sometimes flagons weren't used.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, the main thing, I think we touched on this earlier, if this is what I mean, but just in terms of transporting it around, you know. So if you were gonna drop off rum at a port or get it onto, you know, there were times where they had to give out rum to the army, for instance. So like World War I, everyone in the trenches would have got some rum rations available. It was never a daily tot. It was never a thing in the army the way it was in the Navy. But they definitely, like, when you were in the trenches, you got some booze because you needed that Dutch courage to get you over the top, you know. So they did send out rum, and you couldn't roll barrels around. You couldn't get barrels into the trenches. You couldn't do stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was alluding to is that it seemed to me that the flagons were primarily used for smaller scenarios. Like if you're on a submarine, you couldn't be rolling around an entire cask. But if you were on an aircraft carrier, you know, they weren't giving you all these flagons. They were giving you entire casks or bunches of rum, you know, whatever size they use. So
yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, it's definitely a much easier transport having them in the flagons, and they look cool. And yeah, flagons is a cool word. Yeah.
All right. Well, you know, we've kept you here for quite a bit, and I do appreciate it, Mitch. Before we wrap everything up, was there any questions from anybody who's here tonight, not showing off their dogs, that wants to do any questions you want to get answered while we have Mitch before he passes out from exhaustion?
When are you coming back, Mitch?
To Australia, yeah, hopefully soon.
I mean, obviously not at the moment, but
yeah, I know. Once it all starts up again, we're trying to plan it at the moment. So our company in the UK, we make like 3 other brands, which are whiskey brands, because they're all very whiskey heavy traditionally.
Just tell me what I have to buy.
I think, well, currently the whiskies from our company go through Alba in Australia, which I think I can see Joey Ty's on the chat here. So if you need anything from Alba, go and speak to Joey Ty, because she's awesome.
Will do.
And I think we're looking at it at the moment, whether if they want to take on Black Tot as well, or if it's going to be with someone else, I don't know. So maybe pester Joey Ty and see if she can make some.
Oh, I will.
Hi, is it Dean?
It is Joey. How are you, Dom?
Hi, how's it going? Sorry. Hi, Mitch.
Hey, Joey.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm alright. Well, just speaking of Alba whiskey in Australia, they are still considering about distributing, carrying on Black Tot, but just it's the situation at the moment. It's gonna be a while until they make that decision. Yeah. So, and I just recently get laid off by them as well. So.
Oh shit.
Yeah, but I'm consider if they can, talk to them if they can reinstate me, because the government have like a new package for keeping the workers. So it's all in.
We're trying to work all that out too.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but keep in touch, I guess. I'll let you know if I find out anything. So yeah.
I think something I know we haven't really focused too much on it, but just for anyone in the group that isn't working at a bar or isn't a bartender here, or in the industry, just if you love booze and you frequent these places, like worldwide right now, obviously the hospitality industry has taken the absolute brunt of everything shutting down, and it's one of those, like, bartenders can't work from home. Like, it's not something we can do. Even sending out bottled cocktails is like, it might help a little bit, but it might only just take the edge off someone's rent or something like that. So I just we're still trying to figure out like how best to actually make a meaningful difference and how to do it. There's some much bigger brands which are doing some awesome things at the moment and giving away like food vouchers and donating money to the industry. But just one thing I think is worth saying to anyone out there, if you have the good fortune not to be in the hospitality industry and still have some work, like,
come and spend some money, please.
Yeah, please.
Please come and spend some money into our bars, please.
Yeah, just go to your favorite bar or like message them on Instagram. Just be like, how can we help? Like a lot of them will have T-shirts for sale or bottled cocktails, or some of them are selling like gift vouchers, so you can buy a bar tab for when they open up again, and it just helps get them through this period because it's going to really suck if we get to the end of this and all these bars have closed down, and bartenders for the most part work like everything I told you guys at the start of this, how I worked in America and then UK and stuff. I did all of that, cash in hand. It was all on the go. So there was, if that had happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago, whenever it was now, I would have been stuck just like so many bartenders, so just that's kind of just a little side note. But yeah, if you've got a favorite bar, and there's some I can see on the list there's some wicked bartenders and bar owners that have joined this chat tonight, and we want to support you guys, and please go and buy a little bar tab or go and fucking spend some money as soon as they open up again. Let's have a party. So yeah.
Bless.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and again, guys, this was a big motivator for why I set up this virtual happy hour, because, even as a distributor, there's kind of a sense of displacement, with all this, and, it's not nearly as bad as some of my bartender friends. And, I was hoping that at the very minimum, these kind of conversations would be an escape for all of us, and would kind of just be like, hey, this is a little bit normal. This is us talking spirits, because we're so used to talking spirits every day, all day. And, my conversations with my 2-year-old just don't bring the same type of satisfaction that I get out of out of the spirits talk. So for everybody here who's in the U.S., Impex is going to be the importer for Black Tot. We have it out to all of our different guys across the country. Here in California, JVS Imports is going to be your distributor. So make sure you reach out to us, and let's get some. Probably try to move as many bottles as we possibly can. Moving forward, like I said, I'm going to continue to do these nights and host these nights. So obviously I don't expect everybody to be here all the time, but if you ever feel like you need a little bit of sense of normalcy and you want to maybe learn something new, we have all kinds of great guests, very similar to Mitch, very knowledgeable, great stories that we're going to be telling over the next month. And I hope to God I get to end this after a month. And as much fun as this has been, as much.
Oh, I've got a question. How do we get a hold of you? Because I'm in the UK at the moment. So how do we get in touch with you on Facebook or anything like that, so that we can enter the video call for any of those chats that you have planned for the future?
So yeah, you can find me on Facebook if you're part of the Ministry of Rum group. I was posted on there today promoting this chat. So again, just look up Drew Garrison, and there's going to be a picture of me letting my daughter drink a adult beverage. So that's me, guys. And I'll we'll continue to do these Monday through Wednesday, 7:00 Pacific Standard Time. And just hoping to hopefully make people just feel a little bit better. But to wrap everything up, Mitch, thank you so much for everything that you shared with us tonight. I know all of us are very excited about the future of Black Tot, your future as the global brand ambassador, and we look forward to COVID no longer being a thing, and you bringing your pretty face over to the States, back to Australia, and everywhere in between, so we can hang out and actually drink together and not through a computer.
Yes, no, absolutely. And Drew, thank you very much for putting all these together. It's I know that must be an absolute ball ache of work in the background. So thank you for doing it and bringing all these people together. It's awesome. It's really, really nice to see some of these positive things. I remember when this whole thing started, like a few weeks back, and a friend of mine was like, "Oh, do you want to like video call and like have a drink?" And I was like, that sounds ridiculous. Why would you do that? And now, like a few weeks in, I'm like, thank God there are people like you organizing these things, because it'd be really fucking boring if you weren't. So.
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, a little bit it was selfishly motivated. I had to continue to feel like I still mattered, So there was a little bit of that. I think there's also, we all have a little bit of an ego if we're in this industry. So, but again, you guys, thank you so much.
Before you go, Drew, I thought we should do a little toast.
Okay.
Definitely should.
Yes.
Because this is a thing that we'll be doing soon and all together. Yes, Dan.
Again.
So this is a toast that I got taught by Jim Wrigley, the guy who started me off at Trailer Happiness and got me into this job as well. Pour yourself a little drink if you've got one, or a little glass.
I know this one.
So I've never done it over video before. This is going to be quite weird. So, but I reckon we do the same kind of thing. So you have to do the arm movements as well. Okay, it's very important. You have to follow along at home. I'll say the first line. You repeat after me, and we'll get through it to the end together. Okay. So is everyone ready?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. All right. So, repeat after me. There are tall ships.
There are tall ships.
And there are small ships.
There are
small ships.
And there are ships that sail the sea.
And there are ships that sail the sea.
But the best ships. Are friendships.
Our
friendships.
So here's to you and me.
So here's to you and me. Cheers, Mitch.
Cheers, Mitch.
Well, That was awesome. I look forward to a lifelong friendship with you and everybody else here. So hope to see you guys again. Stay safe, stay healthy, keep drinking good rum and preaching the good word. And you know, hopefully we see you guys again out here soon. So from Sacramento, signing off. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks so much, Drew.
Everybody, stay safe. Have a good night.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Mitch.
Bye,
Bye,
Mitch.
Mitch.
Bye.